So, what is shadow work and why is it so important? If you are anybody that is into healing, witchcraft, new age, ascension, any of these things, you have at least heard the term shadow work. And probably you get the gist of it, I would imagine, right? I mean, it sounds kind of like what it is. Although, if I'm honest, if I remember back to when I first heard the term, it sounded scary and daunting. And it's really not. I mean, it can be uncomfortable. It certainly is uncomfortable, matter of fact. But that doesn't necessarily equate to scary or painful or anything like this. But anyways, shadow work is the process of bringing awareness to, acknowledge of, and integrating the shadow, which is your repressed self. That's what the shadow is. So anything as you were growing up, since the time you were a baby to now, anything that happened where you learned not to do a thing, it goes to the shadow. We feel like that's what we're supposed to do, and as we're growing up, it certainly kind of is, because it helps us to fit into our environment, to keep ourselves safe, so that we're not getting, in trouble or embarrassed or abused or anything like this, right? But what happens is when that's left in the shadow, and it never gets acknowledged or validated or accepted or loved or any of these things, it just stays in the subconscious, and then it silently controls your life in self-destructive ways, right? Because the shadow and the ego are to keep us safe as a human while we're here in this vessel. Ultimately, that's what they're for. They're not. Neither one of them are bad, the shadow or the ego. But if left unchecked, it can really cause havoc on your life. It can begin to have you, partaking in habits that you are unhealthy for you, not very good for you. I have found initially when I first my attention was brought to shadow work, it was about generational curses and my own personal karmic loops that I found and brought aware that it was not only within myself that I noticed these patterns happening again and again, but also within my entire lineage, my bloodline, my family line. And then even further, looking even further in society as a whole and in humanity as a whole, collective. I noticed these patterns and these destructive habits that really all root from trauma and the shadow and the subconscious mind. And it causes a lot of havoc when it is unchecked, but once there's awareness brought to it, the process is literally so simple to release it. You bring acknowledgement to it and the validation, lose the judgment and bring, just acceptance to, okay, this is what you felt. This is, your experience and your perception from the shadow is valid. From your child self, your inner teenager, whatever it is valid and worthy of being loved just as you are, right? Because it is you. It is an aspect of you. You can't, love yourself and accept yourself fully if you have not saw and accepted your shadow aspects, right? But then once you do that, then it just fizzes right away and it just releases. And then, in the shadow isn't just, unhealthy things. It's also a lot of things that actually are like your superpower, honestly, that you were just gaslit into thinking that it was, not good or embarrassing or whatever. So you hid it away. But in reality, that's your gift. That's, we all have gifts and talents and all these kinds of things. And so many of them are in the shadow because we've been taught to repress it. So once you release that heavy-ish, then you can tap into those gifts and talents and stuff that you maybe haven't previously since you were a kid, or maybe even at all in this lifetime, right? Because trauma even goes back lifetimes and generations. That is scientifically proven. Even if you don't believe in reincarnation, it is scientifically proven that generational trauma carries down in the DNA. It does. It truly does. So in my DNA is the trauma of my ancestors on all sides. Of my blood ancestors. That's not even including any of the woo-woo, spiritual soul stuff. And then you add that's a whole other layer of the different, higher dimensional beings that are not actually physically beings anymore because something catastrophic happened on their planet, or, you know, or whatever. They were in some kind of big war and now they only exist in higher dimensions because they were, you know what I mean? Like, that trauma carries in your soul, in your DNA, in your blueprint. And so, yeah, yesterday we left off with this shadow work here, and I ended with the core wounds activated, physical correlations, and the core wound antidotes, right? So, oh no, it wasn't even yesterday, it was 2 days ago, that's right, because this thing just took me 2 days. Look at this, look at all this writing. Took me 2 flippy days because you know what I did? This one right here is called Digging Deeper, Habit Tracking. Okay, so we're going to come back to this whole entire page of unhealthy habits. Right. I literally went through, look, hold up. I went through each and every flippy one. So, let me just find one. Okay, I find myself reaching for, insert, habit, food, sweets, when I feel bored, sad, lonely, yearning for nutrients, sense of habit or comfort. Okay, I find myself reaching for or participating in blank unhealthy habit that I noticed when I feel, listing the feelings of why I even am doing that, what makes me do that. And afterwards, I feel a list of things that I feel afterwards. So, for this one, bloated, teeth hurt, ashamed, guilty, bad for ingesting harsh things, solar plex, cover/expand. You see, because on that one, I'm not exactly sure. I always notice, obviously when you feel bloated, right, it's in your belly. But there's like something specific right here that I notice when I'm doing that. Every time when I'm afterwards, after I've eaten something that doesn't feel good, and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And it's like right here. It kind of literally feels like cover. That's why I put a question mark there. Kind of just, I don't know. Anyways, let's see. Another one here. Got this and right here. This one here. I find myself allowing someone to take advantage of me when I'd rather focus on helping others than face self and help me. Bruh. That's self-awareness right there. Oh, okay, anyways. And afterwards I feel angry and resentful to self for allowing this to happen. Lethargic, disconnected from source nature, looking for external validation and love and connection. Afterwards, I feel guilty, remorseful for reacting rather than responding, feeling worthless, unlovable. Right here, oh my golly. Dude, these were some real good, like, that's why it took me 2 days for this. I did 1 full page one day, 1 full page one day, because it's like honestly hard. It's like a lot energetically to actually feel these feelings and put it on paper and express that to yourself, just to your own self, to do these things. Because it's a lot of like really digging and sorry, my music just stopped and that distracted me. Anyways, it's a lot. It's hard. And so for anybody doing this kind of work, like legit, respect on it, baby, because this shit, it like literally is the one thing that nobody wants to do. That's why we always find ourselves participating in these bad habits, these vices, you know, whether that's scrolling or whether that's overeating or whether that's finding a substance to abuse to try to escape or numb from these literal things right here. So it's very powerful even to just acknowledge and to just see for your own self, like, why do I do that? Why do I do that? What makes me want to do that? What kind of things are going on inside of me when this is happening? And what happens afterwards? Is it actually fulfilling what I'm trying to do here? And the answer ultimately is no, because you can see on every single one of these, I don't feel what I'm looking for. I don't. In any of these, I feel bad every time. Okay, so here's another really good one. I find myself swapping between codependent and hyper-independent when I am fearful of being abandoned or rejected, feel the urge to suppress my true emotions. And afterwards, I feel unworthy, unlovable, like I'm a failure, a bad person, embarrassed for my behavior when triggered. I find myself judging the way my journey plays out when I want control and I second guess my own intuition and guidance. Afterwards, I feel like an imposter, worry that I'm not enough, or need to always do more, be better, am an overachiever. Okay, so, that was deep stuff. That was deep stuff, and that was just a few of the ones that I was comfortable to share with you guys. But after that, I had to for a bit. I'm like, okay, what comes next? What's next? So, first thing I noticed, common causes, common effects, meaning reasons over and over again when I would put, I do this when I feel like blank. So over and over on these different unhealthy habits or not great habits that I partake in, there was like patterns, obviously, right? Because ultimately it's all coming from certain core things that need to be addressed, and that's what we're doing here in shadow work. So, common causes: fill a void, a sense of habit or ritualistic, to find a sense of connection, or because I'm feeling disconnected, whether that's from self, source, others, nature. It's all one, actually. So when you're feeling disconnected from one, it's because you're disconnected from all, ultimately, which really comes back to self, which is why shadow work is so fucking important, truly. Anyways, okay. Desire to be saved, self-deprivation, lack of self-confidence, lack of trust, unworthy, unlovable. Of course, that damn one keeps coming up again. Common effects, meaning, how did I feel afterwards? After partaking in these unhealthy habits. Again, there was a pattern in that, too, of things that kept coming up again and again. Number one, guilty or ashamed over and over, literally every single one, right? Because it's an unhealthy habit. So I know that, and so even just that fact alone, now I feel guilty. I feel bad about it. Okay, so very first thing, sense of guilt. Desire to expand, sense of anxiety, feeling judged, low self-confidence, self-doubt or doubt in divinity, feel like a failure, unlovable, worthless, imposter or fraud, overachiever, sense of over-responsibility, fear of being seen. So then I'm looking at these and I'm like, okay, so what's the common root here? Ultimately, what am I really looking for, other than, like, when I'm looking to fill a void, what am I really looking for there? What does that actually mean? Feeling desired to be saved, what does that actually mean? When I'm lacking confidence in myself, like, what does that actually mean? Okay, so common roots I've got: connection with self, divinity, Gaia, and others. Desire to expand, grow, make a difference in the world. A sense of validation, knowing who I am. Feeling loved unconditionally by self, God, and others. Desire to succeed and to be a healthy family unit and society member. A sense of understanding of my path and purpose. That's not so bad, right? You know what I mean? Like, when we're participating in not healthy behaviors, it's not because we're bad people or because we're wanting to do bad things to ourselves or others or just, whatever. When you really get down to the root of it, the real root of it, past even the pain and the uncomfortable feelings, it really comes down to, these absolutely normal things for a human to desire, for connection and feeling like a sense of fulfillment and purpose and a sense of direction and succeeding and, having a happy, healthy family dynamic and all these kind of things like that. None of that's bad stuff to want. That's a completely normal human thing to want. But I believe, my personal viewpoint here, is that we have been purposely taught through society and, generation after generation, through trauma and these kinds of things. We've been taught very unhealthy ways to go about attempting to get these things. So it really is, a lot of this shadow work shit really is just unlearning what has been projected onto you by others, by the world, by even your own, self. Because a lot of times we're our worst critic, truly. But ultimately that comes from others, usually, right? In childhood, most often. Okay, so we've got the common roots here, and they're not so bad. It's not so scary. It's not so, whatever. So then down here, at the bottom here, I've got, some high vibe ways to fulfill these. Let's look at other ways to fulfill these. That's how you, in my experience, that's how I have broken other unhealthy habits, is by finding a healthier way to replace that, like finding, again, the same exact thing. Like I said, this is my second round of really deep diving into shadow work. on this kind of level. And seeing, what the core root is, how can we find another way to fulfill that, and then doing so, right? So, high vibe ways to fulfill these common roots, what I'm actually looking for. Healthy rising ritual to ground, connect, energize, and gain direction for the day. Take simple steps daily to ensure healthy progression, right? Begin mirror work and daily journaling again. That's just to continue with the shadow work. I forget, it's so fucking healthy. Like, it seems tedious sometimes. I don't know why. It just feels like a chore sometimes when you're not used to journaling or like meditating or things like that, or even working out, like any of that kind of stuff that's so good for you. It feels like a chore to do it until you actually start doing it and you're like, God damn, I forget how good this actually makes me feel like. Okay, so anyways, create! That was such a big one. Okay. Accept the unconditional love from self and source first. From self and source first. That's a big one for me, and I feel like for a lot of people, because we have been taught to try to fill this void by looking for others, whether that's familial connections, friends, or lovers, right? Self and source first, okay? Reevaluate longer-term goals and see if they still resonate. Be diligent to meditate, divinate, and enter flow state daily. Take inspired action anytime and any way I'm called to. So, that is like serious, hefty shiz that's being moved and shifted around. So, kind of through that whole process, as I was doing that, because I'm ADHD as fuck, and so my brain is all over the place, unless I got these bad boys on and there's something going at all times, because it's like, somehow it's almost like if I could keep the inner squirrel of the ADHD mind occupied with music or something going on my headphones, then I can focus on what I'm trying to do with my hands and my vessel. Does that make sense? So, whilst I was writing this all out, I was listening to some energy plucking. It was not Reiki though, which is what I usually listen to the most and what I do myself the most, is Reiki. This was Nordic, and so it had a whole different feel to it, and I just loved it so much. Listening to some woosah shiz whilst I was writing all of this out. And afterwards I had to go immediately to some mantras so that I could like, not calm down, because I didn't feel triggered, but it's like, what is it? It's almost like to decompress, I guess, because these things coming up that are the most buried are the biggest, truly, as far as like energy goes. Hence why they have been repressed and buried for so very long in the shadow in the first place. And so as we're bringing it back up, like, that's why it often comes in waves, because it's like only as much as one can take, right? We don't want anybody to rage quit you, so it's got to come in healthy little doses that you can take. And then you need some time afterwards to like really just allow it to integrate. And I also really like to, as it's coming up and I'm like looking in its metaphorical eyes, right? We're looking at it with non-judgment, by the way. That's really, really, really important. Even when we're talking about things that aren't harmful, like when I'm writing out like I feel ashamed, but I'm not holding judgment to myself for feeling that guilt, or for, doing whatever it was in the first place that caused the guilt feeling. That's really, really important, because that will literally just continue the cycle more and more and more as you feel more guilty, then you desire to, fill that void even more, and then participate in those, coping mechanisms or unhealthy habits that we have learned, and it's like this vicious cycle. So it's really important to stop the judgment as much as you can. Like, I know that's really hard, because we've been taught, like, as a self-defense mechanism, we are taught to be so critical of ourselves, because it's easier to accept criticism from ourselves than it is from others. So we do it as a sense of like trying to protect ourselves, but ultimately it is hurting us. It really is. Like, it might be helpful maybe like in childhood or something when we're dealing with whatever caused that wound in the first place. But as an adult, as a grown adult, when you're trying to move through the world in a healthy way, and not through these blind, shadowy, things that are distorted and have been repressed, and you know what I mean. Ultimately, the subconscious runs the show until you actually face it. But then once you face it, it will release by itself. You have to feel it first, which is the hard part. That's the part that we've been taught not to do. We've been taught that if we allow ourselves to feel it, it will overtake us, that we will lose control, that we will completely, that when we break, that we're going to break permanently and never be able to come back together again. When in reality, we need to have these breakdowns, which is really just a shedding point. When we allow it to shed, that's when we can, emerge new, and we can face these things head on and, like I said before, choose better for ourselves. Once you know better, you can choose better. But it is a process. It really, truly is. But yeah, it is very energetically depleting. I cannot lie. It truly is. So I would recommend, if you do something like this, to maybe meditate after, take a bath, a shower, drink water, get outside, definitely in the sun, and fresh air if you can. That's like... And if you're woo-woo, you can even visualize whatever gunk came up. You can visualize feeding that right into Mother Earth, because she is the ultimate transmuter for us here, right? And then be sure afterwards, after you visualize yourself releasing all of that to the earth, down through like your roots, right? You can then visualize Source bringing in like... let's see, it's like a fizzy, a gentle, fizzy, warm, white gold, sparkly light, all inside your body, and just kind of filling up, and even outside of your body too, filling up all that space, because you can really feel it when those feelings come up. They're big feelings. And so as you're releasing that, you want to make sure that you're filling that energetic space just as much with some high vibe, so that way more bad, or I don't want to say bad, but more, so that way more lower vibe shiz don't come and replace it. You know what I mean? You don't want to replace your unhealthy habits with other unhealthy habits, right? Ultimately, you want to. I mean, it's one thing if you're progressing and you're going, kind of moving your way up the ladder. Sometimes that's okay if that's what you need to do for right now. But ultimately, the goal is to get to a point where you are replacing unhealthy habits with that healthy habit. And this is part of being healthy. I mean, you really just can't get around it. You really can't. You need to be able to face these things so that they can be released, and so that you can truly love yourself. Because how are you supposed to truly love yourself if you haven't even seen all of yourself, right? The shadow is parts that have always been repressed or hidden. And it's really important now that we're allowing that space to come up and to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be loved. You know what I mean? And understand that, hey, I'm not, bad for any of these things. These are coming up because it's the way that my nervous system currently knows how to handle, process, keep myself safe. Ultimately, it's survival, and it did a great job in the moment when you created those, coping mechanisms or tendencies. But loving yourself enough to being able to see that and put respect on that, what that initially was there for, and say, lovingly, like, thank you. I don't need that anymore now. You know what I mean? I'm in this part of my life now where I'm an adult, I'm safe, I'm in control, as much as we can be. I'm in control, yet I surrender control at the same time. Gotta love that. So, if I'm completely honest, I'm feeling a bit tender and raw and tired, and kind of just like a little bit of fetal energy, like I want to go crawl into a womb and and gestate for a little bit. So, yeah, I'm gonna go take a little nap probably. Love you.